Hi, watercolor students. So we're working on a project here which is about storytelling. And the way we're going to go about that process is by montaging individual images into a larger configuration. And we're going to use a specific technique that involves overlapping forms. And that's a central tenet of this project, is to overlap forms and show some level of transparency. Now, in filmmaking, that's a technique known as a dissolve. I'll say that again, it's called a dissolve, where from when one scene in a film transitions into another scene, sometimes they'll allow the two images to overlap, which suggests kind of a change in locale and also suggests kind of a passage in time. So the way to create a dissolve in painting, and once again, we're trying to tell a story in one picture. How do you do that? That's really an interesting challenge. So to do that in painting, we're going to overlap and montage these forms, montage and overlap these forms so that you see things emerging and disappearing. For instance, this parakeet here is emerging, it's starting to materialize, but there's still parts of it where you can see it not quite fully emerging. You can still see some element of what's underneath. Therefore, it sort of transitions in a way that, so that one form gives away to another. You have this sense of time passing, the scene shifting, the circumstances changing. And that's the method we're going to explore in terms of storytelling. Now, it can be kind of daunting, the idea that, you have to layer these, just paint these forms right over the top of one another. It doesn't seem right, but it is right. It's done all the time. And you've seen examples where artists are doing that. And what it will help in terms of your development as artists is will allow you to learn how to work more improvisationally, and it will allow you to see the possibilities of kind of doing something and then changing it, responding, changing it again, evolving. Nothing is set in stone, and you can always fix it or make it better. And part of that process is just knowing that you can be improvisational. You don't have to plan everything out. You can plan things out somewhat generally, but you can also shift course. You can also respond to what's there and change. So as I have a theme going here, which obviously is creatures, animals, creatures from the natural world. Most of them are living organisms. Here's things with brains. Here's a flower. I suppose the flower has a brain. But anyway, things from the natural world. Is there a specific narrative or story that I'm telling yet? No, not necessarily. It might evolve in that way. Certainly there's a general thematic thing going on, but I'm hoping that if I introduce additional symbols and so on, it can take on a more conscious meaning. All right, so the first thing I want to do, and I want to demonstrate on this piece, and then I can talk about, planning something from the outset, how you might go about that. But I want to just demonstrate this technique of layering. So what I've done is to start this montage, I've just made very simple sketches in watercolor, kind of line sketches, not totally completed, but kind of outlines, just general washes. I started with the fish. I think I did the mantis. I did the rat over here. I did the wing. I did a butterfly. And then as the space started getting more full, then I started layering more distinctly over the top of certain things. And so then I did the parakeet. Now the parakeet starting to become, these things are less defined. Parakeet's starting to become more kind of more three-dimensional, more real, because I filled in more space. And in order for the parakeet to stand out a little bit better, I also mixed some of the opaque white into the colors so that it would block out some of the background. I want some of the background to show. I want that parakeet to look sort of transitional, like it's not quite fully there, but becoming there, becoming real. So I still allowed some of the background to show through. Can you consciously plan that? Yeah, you can, but also it just happens in the process. So I would say don't worry about it too much. But remember, your idea, your directive, the thing you have to do is to overlap forms, and you can't plan it out all at once. You have to paint or draw one thing, and then you have to paint another thing over the top of it. Therefore, it's going to look transparent, but you can't sort of simultaneously paint them both as if it looks transparent like that. You just have to layer. All right, so I have another parakeet form that I want to include here to go as a kind of a match with this parakeet. And I maybe want the head to be up here. So I'm going to start out with some kind of a line. A few washes, sort of a line, more of a line rendering. First I get the shape. And I should say that too, if it's an interesting shape, then that's probably worth painting, because it doesn't matter so much what goes on within the shape. If you get the shape, like that's a beautiful shape. That's a beautiful shape. Doesn't matter so much what happens within the shape. If you get the shape itself, it's okay. So I'm just concentrating on how these shapes relate to one another and how they create a larger compound form of layered images. I'm looking at the overall shape, but I'm looking at individual shapes within that. So here goes. Just going to get the profile. As you layer more and more, it starts to become a little more, you want to maybe paint, you're going to have to kind of paint a little darker each time just so you can see things stand out. Remember, I'm just concentrating for the moment on the profile. Right? Still don't like my all right. Now this can be traced out. You can do this with a pencil line ahead of time. Just kind of draw your form out before you begin painting. It's kind of up to you. Now I'm defining my shape so I can see it a little bit better. So I got a profile going. This is what I'm painting right here, just off screen. And just try not to worry about what's underneath. Just focusing on the form itself. And got to get that profile in there. Some wing. tip of a wing, then the tail. Now, right now, the tail looks like the tail feathers look like they're going right through the hummingbird. And maybe I don't want that to happen. I can sort of leave off, or I can just sort of just not, I don't have to fully finish the parakeet down there. I can just kind of let it be more generalized. There, perfect. And let me do some tail feathers. There's the dark of the tail feather. And then here's a wing out here. Okay. There's the breast and the belly. And then there's going to be a wing here. So now I have the face, the head, eye there. And then the beak. The nostril, that can be defined later. That's kind of the shape of the beak, and then there's this little thing underneath. And then I basically have that entire shape of the bird. I could do let me do the feet. Change the color a little bit. So it's kind of perching, and it's got these little down here. So now I have this shape, and obviously it's way too complicated in here. Something has to become more dominant, and it's going to be the bird. So I'm going to work on kind of bringing that up, minimizing the underlying shapes, and then bringing that bird up more. So it means I'm going to have to rely on opaque pigment. First, I might just try to wash a little bit of this under stuff out. And there's not a whole lot, whoops. There's not a whole lot of paint there anyway. I'm going to blot a little bit up here. There. Now I'm going to start filling with color, and I'm going to use opaque pigments to make that color stand out. So the bird's this really pretty aqua color. Trying to think how I get that. I think that I have some, yes, I have some really nice sort of turquoise paint on my palette. So I'm going to lay some of that in, do a little wash. What's so beautiful about these birds is their iridescence. And then here I'm going to come in with some white. And nothing's dried yet. I'm just going to paint the white in right into the turquoise and let the white's going to run interference, so to speak. And it's going to it'll activate the turquoise and make it stand out a little bit more, believe it or not. There, so now the breast is starting to stand out a little bit more because the white's eliminating some of that background color. And then I can do that over here on the wing. I'm going to come in with some of the white. And also some patterning on the back. There's this kind of dappled look with the feathers. And it's really a complex pattern that I know I can't do it all, but I can sort of suggest that I'm painting right into the white too. And then I'm hoping that just the way that the fact that the colors will just interact with one another, there will be this kind of effect of, the soft dappled look on the pattern on the back. And then later, if necessary, I can go back and kind of make some things more clarified. Doing these kind of tiny little feather shapes. Like I said, if you get the shape of the overall form down, what goes on inside the shape isn't quite so critical. It just, sort of, you put the paint down and let the paint kind of mix, and it can be very successful. I'm going to continue down with this turquoise on the tail. Because I think it's really worth having the tail extend downward like that. And once again, I'm going to add the white. And that's just so So I'm not adding so much, but I want that white to interact with the turquoise color. And that will make this form feel a little more solid and kind of pop out a little bit. I'm going to come up with some more dark here and on the back. And the more I emphasize the values, more contrast, this form pops out more and more. You can see it really distinguishes itself from the background. And then the fish that used to be there, you'll see little bits of it, but then suddenly the parakeet's taking on more visual dominance. And that's, so far that's working kind of the way I want it to. Now, once I've done this, then that's going to require some change elsewhere. And that's sort of the process. Like you do one thing in one place, and then you just keep kind of organizing until there's this satisfactory, kind of pleasing visual flow of information. Going to continue up into the head with this dark. And once again, I'm just I'm kind of looking at what's there, and then responding in paint. It's not a photograph. I'm not trying to make a photograph here. I'm just trying to be. I'm looking at the source for understanding of the form, but I'm not responsible for making it look exactly like that. But I'm just trying to honor the form, honor the color, because it's just beautiful. I could not visualize this on my own. I need an aid. I need a visual aid, and since I don't have a parakeet to sit there for me, I just have to, look at the photograph. There are these interesting kind of zebra stripes in the head that I'm interested in doing. And I'm thinking I might have to come back with, white. I'm going to start with dark, but I'm going to come back later with my opaque white. And right now I'm going to put a little bit of white here on the want to get rid of some of that form in the background there. There's this really beautiful mark right here. It's a deep blue. It almost looks like the gill on a fish or something. So I'm going to put it there, and then when it dries, I want it to be kind of soft like that because it's got soft edges. So I painted it right into the wet white. And then when that dries, then I'll come back and make a slightly darker core. And now I'm going to go to a dark. And I'm going to do this kind of zebra striping pattern. seems to all lead to the eye. And when I'm done, I'm gonna maybe dissolve it a little bit. All this stuff is kind of scary to do, but you just have to kind of allow yourself to do it. Trust what you're seeing. And if you're honest with that, you know, it's going to be okay. It's going to look all right. And this kind of zebra striping stuff transitions down into these more kind of dappled patterns. This is about dry now. I'm going to come back and create more pattern in there. And then here, I'm going to do some beak. And then maybe drop a little white in there. Let it spread naturally. And again, that's something I can come back and elaborate on. Then I'm just going to dissolve some of these little stripes I made a little bit, make them softer. Just so that they aren't too rigid. And then I think this will benefit from my coming back after things have maybe dried a little bit. And then I can, you know, do some highlighting, perhaps with the white. All right, so a little dark where the eye is. Then I'll move on to something else, and then wait for this to dry, assess what I have, and then come back in and make some follow-up marks. But you see how now it's kind of standing out a little bit more distinctly against the background. The color's more full-bodied. I used a little opaque white just to tamp down some of the stuff going on in the background. But it's okay if it still shows a little bit, because that's part of our plan. To have the images kind of transitional like that. Okay, so now I look at the whole and try to determine, you know, what I want to bring out, what do I want to sort of lay back more. I sort of like how the fish almost becomes, the fish is just back there, just kind of an afterthought. You're hardly aware of it at first. I think with this wing here, this bird wing, it's maybe too transparent. So I'm going to fill it in a little bit with the same method that I was using before. And think about what sort of color to use. I think I'll use a pale blue. Let me get the blues to circulate. That's just a very intuitive choice. So I'm wetting this first, and I'm going to get some cerulean blue. Don't want to have too much blue. I'm rethinking that right now. Let's try it. There, just kind of more for pattern. And then just so that it pops out a little bit more, I'm going to add some white to that too. This is just the opaque white watercolor. That comes with the set, or it could be white gouache. That's kind of nice. I'm feeling like it should go, this is just purely intuitive, but I'm feeling like it should maybe transition to more of a reddish brown. So I'll put some reddish brown strokes in there too. Trying to just create interesting textures and patterns that will a little red, that will create variety within this overall area. Right now, there's not a lot of surface texture, you know, the shapes are there, but there isn't a lot of variety in the surface texture. Getting a little bit here with the parakeet. And I'm going to come back with a white too. Just to make it a little bit more solid. There. Now I can see what happens as this dries, and I can assess and, you know, and then come back and work on that more. So the wing is still partly transparent, and it's starting to fill in, you know, starting to become more substantial. I'm gonna continue with the blue up here too. But one could be using dry brush, one could be using, you know, kind of scumbling, all these different techniques that would basically be determined by, you know, what are the characteristics of the form that you're trying to replicate. And in this case, it's kind of it's kind of the feather, it's a wing, bird's wing, it has a kind of iridescence to it, so I'm just trying to create this kind of dappled pattern. There. So this is drying. I think that I kind of like what's, I like this so far. I might try to do more floral shapes. Because one thing you can do, you keep adding shapes when you don't like, if you want something covered because you don't like how it looks, then you just keep adding stuff. So I have this echinacea flower here. This is a former shape of a butterfly wing that I didn't think I was drawn that well. So I think I need to cover that with something. So I will come in and make another flower shape and then see where that leads me. So start with a flower shape. And then it'll trying to make that central area just kind of a little bit more dark and somewhat dimensional by adding the two tones, and put in some of the petals. Flower acts as a compositional filler. And I kind of like how the rat is peeking out behind the flowers. Seems like the more forms are layered in here, it does become somewhat like a microcosm of the natural world. Like if you're taking this, you're taking a walk through, say, a subtropical jungle, you might see a variety of wildlife, above and below the canopy, and then it becomes kind of a synthesis of what you're experiencing on that walk. Flowers, you see little rodents, You see butterflies flitting around, you see birds perching in the trees, you look down at the ground and you see a mantis. Suddenly a hummingbird comes flitting by, that sort of thing. And trying to compress that experience into a visual moment. And I suppose that's maybe the storyline of the painting, that it's trying to conjure up a memory of this experience and trying to bring out the essential components of that experience in that walk. But obviously you can't illustrate yourself taking the walk and seeing all these things. You're trying to coalesce all of that into this compact narrative so that there are aspects of it. Right, and there's a pond and there's a fish in the pond. This spans multiple walks in multiple kinds of forested environments, because all of these creatures come from different geographic locales. So it's a memory of many walks. And then I'm adding color. To the petals and the flower. And with the flower too, I have some time to decide if I want to make it less transparent with the highlighting. While it's still wet, I can do it. While it's still wet, I can do it after it dries. Once again, it's not so much color as it is shape. But this kind of radial shape, this overall design is kind of radial. And then I like these little internal radial shapes. What I'm going to do right now is add the white where the flower is overlapping the rat. So then you don't see the rat as much. I want the rat to be behind the flower. So adding the white, just so that it gives a little more oomph, visual oomph. I don't really need the white out here, so then the yellow can be more intense. There, and obviously this is kind of impressionistic, but I am paying attention to being accurate regarding shape. So details don't matter so much, I think, as just kind of getting a shape, and then the viewer is able to kind of fill in that information. I'm coming back around this kind of internal edge. with a little dark. You can see when you add, you know, a darker value, the form really pops out. I'm just gonna, to make it look more rounded, I'm just gonna soften the edge a little bit. And then maybe add a little sort of patterning. Little circles. There. And perhaps additional washes there, or outlines, you know, like I want this to pop, I can always outline it. Or extra emphasis. There. Okay. Now going back to the parakeet here. I feel like I could add additional marks or the feathers. Kind of like what I did down here. Just so there's a little more definition going on. I'm using the ghost markings from the original kind of wet into wet as guidance. Now just little hatch marks. Yeah, like this still needs something like maybe white. Oh, here I'm going to put another kind of darker mark right in the middle of this mark. Just to show that now it's got kind of a darker core to it. And a little white. kind of a combination of the white and then the underlying grayish marks. To show the patterning on the feathers. And some over here too. Haven't quite found my vocabulary of marks yet for over here, but maybe that's something that'll happen as I continue to look at it. There. A little more dark along that border. Okay. So I think I want to jump now making one last little thing here. I want to jump now to just talking about planning, how you might plan your own. I wanted to make a little more distinction on the beak. So this sort of thing, as I'm looking at it, I'm thinking, did I get too literal? So this could be something that, later on I come back and I just kind of blur it out a little bit, but essentially you can see how this form kind of materialized against this background. So these are solid, this is maybe semi-solid, this is relatively solid, and so on and so forth. So you get this sort of a hierarchy of fully solid forms, semi-transparent forms, and very transparent forms in the background. And then you just keep working until there is a sense of visual flow and order. I like this central shape here, defined by the wing and then the breast of these two birds. And I kind of like what's going on in there. So maybe I bring more stuff into the parameters. All right, now going to planning a work. What I suggest is think about what you want to do. Now I've visualized perhaps a dream kind of thing, and the plan was maybe to literally illustrate a dream. And so this is how I would prepare for that. First of all, I have a drawing of someone sleeping. And I'm thinking, okay, and this is my father. So I'm thinking, okay, what's my father dreaming about while he's sleeping? So then I tried to think about different symbols or memories that have that represent his life experiences. So then I went and just downloaded a number of images, former military experience, his frustration with the environmentalists' use of the spotted owl to protect old growth forest, favorite pet, his love of fishing, lifelong member of the NRA until he finally renounced his membership late in life. Another pet, he had a pet heron, many dogs in his life. grew up on a farm, had a horse, was trained as an engineer, a mechanical engineer, and once ran a foundry. These are all symbols that are chosen because they're interesting shapes and have interesting colors. So then these are what one would surround themselves with. Now, if you can't print things out, then perhaps you can just have things on a tablet. If you don't have a tablet or computer, desk, laptop or something where you have an image in front of you, you could just have your cell phone set up. But it's always good to look at something just for a reference point, because you are trying to learn how to represent things accurately. And you have these materials surrounding you as references as you start to work. So then start with the drawings here. And then I start to montage elements up here. It might be good to start with an initial wash just to get comfortable with putting things down on the paper. So here's just getting the paper wet. Think about where's your flow of movement going. Then maybe just dropping some color in there and use that as a starting point. Remember, our wet into wet washes. So I'm thinking of kind of like a dream balloon as opposed to a word balloon, like a dream balloon. That might be defined by this big stain. And then stain would just be sort of a backdrop then to start layering images into. And then if the sleeping figure is down here, maybe this sort of leads down as if it's, emerging from that individual's body. In the old Victorian ghost photographs, they call it ectoplasm. There's an ectoplasm kind of coming out of the person's body. These were all made up photographs, of course. So this is like a dream or thought balloon, and then the figure's here, and then one just starts layering with the figure here, and then layering some of these images into this thought balloon. But this provides kind of a basis for starting, and also some transparency to work with, because just once you start layering, you'll see this kind of through the forms, and that will create this kind of interesting, semi-real, semi-dream-like sensation. Okay, so we'll continue to revisit this.